CodePink is a peace activism group, mostly women, who have bravely protested drones, civil rights abuses, and wars. I've enjoyed joining their brave leaders, Colonel Ann Wright, Allie McCracken, and founder Medea Benjamin, but found the Trump Exposed event was unfair since he is for peace, and attended it to hear what they have to say and speak out if necessary. It was at the Busboys Poets Restaurant in Washington, D.C., and well attended by mostly anti-Trump people listening to a panel of 6 Democrats with the same old accusations of hate, racism, sexism, and warmongering.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for being here. So my name is Medea Benjamin. I'm with CodePink. And I want to welcome you here tonight. Clapping. We have a lot to get done tonight, and it's an amazing panel that we put together. So I don't know if you're all feeling the way I'm feeling, which is stressed, worried, anxious, sort of going into the abyss of the unknown. And the one thing that makes us feel better in all of this is to come together like this and learn from each other. So first, let's give a thank you to, where's Andy Shalal and from Busboys and Poets way in the back there. For giving us this wonderful venue that is a place for us to come together and talk to each other. Is the sound good? Is this too loud? Too loud. Too loud. Easy for the front people to say.
How about that?
How about, I think this is too low now. We'll get it right. How is this? Can you hear in the back there? Great. So we put together a wonderful panel of speakers. When we talked to Andy at Busboys and the Institute for Policy Studies, we talked about needing to do a series like this, a monthly series where we would come together and look at how the Trump administration is affecting us in our lives, in our work, and what we can do about it. So tonight is a more general look at a number of different issues, and that we hope in the next ones that we do, we'll dig deeper into some more individual issues, like we can dig deeper into the healthcare issue, into the women's issue, into the issues of Islamophobia, into many of the issues that we're going to talk about tonight, but unfortunately not in a lot of depth because there's not enough time. So we're going to give each speaker a chance to address the issue about how the election of Donald Trump is affecting their work and the ways that they see that we can resist. We'll go through each of the panels. We have a guest here who is doing some really amazing resistance work, and I'm sure there's a number of you in the room who can add to that as well, and then we'll open it up for discussion. If you have friends who might want to watch this on live stream, it's on the CodePink Facebook being live streamed right now. Let's thank John and Ann for helping out with the live stream here. And if you can tweet, that would be great. We're thinking of use the hashtag #ExposeTrump. And let's get this out to as many people as we can. So we're going to start with the wonderful analyst, author, Institute for Policy Studies, Phyllis Bennis. For those of you who don't know Phyllis, anytime that there's something that's happening in the world that we really don't know how to interpret it, how to analyze it, how to put it in a progressive perspective, we look towards Phyllis Bennis. So let's give a warm thanks to Phyllis.
Thanks, Medea. I think I'm going to have to just hold this back. So the answer to the question is, we don't know. That's actually the answer to a lot of questions right now. But specifically the question, what is Donald Trump's foreign policy going to look like and how bad is it going to be? The second part is easy. It's going to be really bad. The first part, what is it going to look like? We're not really sure. So the uncertainty, the opacity is still a major problem. We thought we had some of this figured out. We thought we were hearing some little bits about isolationism, not wanting to do regime change, not wanting to do nation building, and that was sounding like, okay, maybe that's a little less dangerous than some other foreign policies we could speak of. But if you look at who he's appointed to the cabinet, not so much. So we have a cabinet full of generals and gazillionaires. That is not a recipe for a new kind of foreign policy that is less interventionist, less militaristic, less wasteful of lives and fortune. That's sort of the bad news. We do have some clues. We don't have a lot of information we can really sink our teeth into, not that I'm suggesting anybody sink teeth into anything, although, well, all tactics may be appropriate. But I do think that the question of who is on this cabinet, who has been appointed and may be approved, may be confirmed and may not be confirmed. We don't know for sure. But we do have some indications from those appointments that should make us very, very wary, very cautious, very concerned about what the foreign policy is likely to look like. So we have, for many decades, seen foreign policy in this country waged in the interest of corporate profits and military power. That's not new. A Trump foreign policy is certainly not going to challenge either of those phenomena. What we are seeing that's a little bit different is that we don't have people on the cabinet who are representing the interests of those who profit from oil industries and those who make a killing on war industries. We have those people in the cabinet. That's a bit different. We have the personal profit making of people in the extractive industries like Rex Tillerson, the former CEO of ExxonMobil. We have people who are themselves standing to make fortunes and who have made fortunes in all of these arenas. So if we look at what that is going to look like, we hear about the possibility of rethinking, rechanging US policy towards China, that the one China policy might be up for grabs. Well, what does that have to do with the fact that the Trump Tower industry is talking about building a new Trump Tower in Taiwan? Does that have anything to do with why the coming soon-to-be president took a phone call from the president of Taiwan for the first time in 40 years? A US president took a call that was arranged by the Trump transition team, even though the call was placed from Taiwan. That's not a coincidence. That's not a coincidence, and that's not about a foreign policy shift. That's about private profit that's being made by this cabinet. When we look at the question of Rex Tillerson, and I would recommend to all of you a terrific article by our colleague Antonia Yuhas in These Times magazine on Rex Tillerson, why he may be the most dangerous Secretary of State in US history. I recommend you read that, on the danger of someone who has built his fortune on the extractivist industries that have so devastated not only communities of color in some broad scope around the world. It starts with that, but then goes directly to the question of indigenous communities, destruction of the environment, the dramatic abandonment of any even rhetorical commitment to human rights when there is profit to be made, the use of national armies in places like Nigeria to act as the foot soldiers to represent the interests of that US corporation. Rex Tillerson has overseen all of that and more. So the question of what he will do as Secretary of State, on the one hand, is quite simple. There's no reason to think he will not continue to make foreign policy of the United States that is based directly on maintaining the profits that he has made for all these years from ExxonMobil and from the other extractive industries around the world. Then, if you have 3 or 4 generals on the cabinet, if your national security advisor and your Secretary of Defense and more are generals, you have to worry about hammers and nails. You know, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If you're a general or a recently retired ex-general, especially an ex-Marine general like Mad Dog Mattis, the new Secretary of Defense to be, who, as we know, the Marines' logo is once a Marine, always a Marine. That means he never retired at all. If you have those generals in the cabinet, what you're looking at is a scenario where you have to take into account that if you're a general, every problem has a military solution. Just like if you're Rex Tillerson, every problem has to be answered by profit. Those are easy. These are hammers and nails that we are looking at in this cabinet. So as we look at the broad question of resistance to what is coming, the broad question of resisting normalization of racism, of misogyny, of xenophobia, of Islamophobia, all of these things must be resisted. And as we look at the need to refrain from normalizing those things, even as we challenge this new foreign policy, we have to look at what is it going to look like. Now that's where we get to the question of we don't really know. When we look at what Trump has said in the 18 months that he's been running for president, he's said a whole range of things. He's talked about isolationism. He's talked about being neutral between Israel and the Palestinians. That would be a shift. But that was a long time ago. He's not talking about that anymore. He's talking about being more pro-Israel than anybody ever has been. He's talking about officially supporting the settlements. And the problem is, there's 3 ways at least he could govern. And we don't know which he's going to choose. He might be a micromanager who sets all the foreign policy from the White House, tells his secretaries of state, his secretary of defense, whatever, what they are to do, what the policy is, and he makes them implement it. That's option 1. Option 2, he turns over policy making to those people and says, you figure it out, you're the experts. My style is to bring around smart people who figure out the policy and then implement it. They're on their own. Number 3, he turns it all over to Pence. Now, if you all remember, that's what he offered when he offered the vice presidency to Kasich. He said, I'll let you make all the decisions. You can make all the policy, foreign and domestic. Meaning he was giving Kasich the presidency. He was just going to do the fun stuff. Fly around on Air Force One and do big rallies or whatever. And Kasich was so outraged by it, he not only turned it down, he went public and said, this is what this guy offered me, this is outrageous. I don't know that he offered the same thing to Pence, but there's no particular reason he didn't, to think he didn't. That is very dangerous, because Pence is a very sophisticated political operative. As you know, the long-standing governor of Indiana, one of the most right-wing governors around, particularly on issues of women's rights, on LGBT rights, on immigrants, on Islamophobia. He was one of the worst around. He was the first governor to announce that he would not allow one Syrian refugee to enter his state. As if he had the right to do that. As if he had that right. So none of these options are very good. We don't know exactly which ones he's going to choose, so we don't know exactly how this is going to play out. Now, let me just finish with 1 or 2 other points about how we fight back. You know, the peace movement, the self-defined peace movement, has not been very strong in the last few years. We've had a lot of challenges. There's a lot of work to be done. And one of the things I think we've recognized is that we don't necessarily build the most strength by trying to build an independent peace movement that's trying to lead on its own. But costs to all the other movements that are rising right now, to Black Lives Matter, to the Dreamers, to the environmental justice movement, to the LGBT movements, to all of those movements, to the environmental justice movement, to the LGBT movements, to all of those movements.
I was talking to one of my colleagues, and a lot of people think that in areas that are diverse, hatred and bigotry is probably not that much of an issue. And working in Maryland specifically, I can tell you that it's interesting that many of the reports that we received of hate crimes and bias attacks have been in historically diverse areas of the state. For example, Montgomery County, which is, has one of the largest populations of Muslims in Maryland. And I think that goes to show that diversity in itself is not enough to push back against intolerance. We need each and every American from all walks of life who is willing to step forward and say that this is not the America that we want to work for. This is not the America that we want our children to grow up in. And it doesn't reflect the values that are enshrined and the rights that are enshrined in our Constitution. Post-election, we know the Southern Poverty Law Center has been tracking the number of hate incidents reported across the nation. And there were over 1,000 incidents that were reported. And even that's a conservative estimate of hate incidents that target not only Muslims, but also LGBTQI members, Jewish Americans, African Americans. And of this number, in Maryland, we had several students on college campuses who wear the Islamic headscarf, who had their headscarves pulled, or who were physically assaulted or attacked because of their religious attire. And of these 4 cases that were brought to my attention, unfortunately, nobody felt comfortable coming forward. And even though we weren't able to help those individuals specifically, this made me determined to do everything that I could do in my capacity as an activist and a community advocate to make sure that women who are identifiably Muslim and children who are identifiably Muslim feel empowered to push back against the hatred, to push back against the bigotry. So we partnered with a local self-defense martial arts company, and we are going around to different mosques, and we're happy to go to synagogues and to churches and to any other community if they want to reach out. And we're teaching self-defense. We're teaching our community members how they can protect themselves. And the response has been overwhelming. It's just been so gratifying to see people channel their fear and their anxiety into strength and into confidence. It's been so gratifying to see young girls stand up taller because they feel that they can be American and they can be Muslim, and they don't have to compromise either aspect of their identity in order to please bigots or appease people who think that that's not the case. One of the I think most important aspects of this current administration that we have to keep in mind is that we cannot afford to ignore what's happening. As much as it's anxiety-inducing, I know all of the drug companies that are cashing in on the profits of Americans who are anxious. Pfizer, we're looking at you. They're thrilled that Americans are anxious, but we can't afford to turn off the television, and we can't afford to not pay attention to what's going on. How many of you watched the Senate confirmation hearings that took place last week for Attorney General and Secretary of State? Quite a few. So chances are you're probably as appalled and as anxious and as petrified and terrified as I was, and many of my co-panelists were here on the stage. To see our country, going in a direction that I think many of us had never anticipated during this election cycle, and to realize that some of our worst fears are coming true, I think has been something that has really been a wake-up call. And I think I have a friend who works in the Black Lives Matter movement, and she likes to say that we have to stay woke, and I think that that's something that applies very well to all communities who could be impacted by the policies and the legislation that could be put forth under the current administration. We have got to stay woke. We have got to keep our eyes open, and we have to watch out for one another. So that means in a county in Maryland where there's 5 nooses that are found at a construction site, I'm not black, but I don't have to be black for my organization to call for a swift and thorough investigation into the perpetrators behind that crime. When a Jewish American is attacked or if a synagogue is attacked, my organization is going to issue a call demanding an investigation. Last Monday, there was a Jewish community center in Baltimore that was evacuated, along with 5 other Jewish community centers across the country. because of a bomb threat that was dialed in. And it turned out to be a hoax, thankfully. But my community, American Muslims, we know what it's like to have a house of worship be evacuated because of a bomb threat that was called in. This happened not too far from the Jewish Community Center at the Islamic Society of Baltimore just last year as well. And so when that happened, we reached out to the Jewish Community Center, and tomorrow on MLK Day, we're going to be taking cards written by Muslim children, expressing solidarity with that community and saying that we're not going to stay silent when you're being attacked this way. And I think that that's what's going to help us get through. I think that, if there's any silver lining to the cloud that's hanging over our nation right now, and I can tell you there's a very heavy cloud, because coming into DC tonight, it was difficult. And knowing that after January 20th, I love this city. I was born and raised in Maryland, and I remember my childhood, coming into DC and going to all the monuments. But I feel like over the next 4 years after January 20th, it's not going to be the same driving into our nation's capital. But we have to make sure that, we are empowered and we're educated, we know we're informed, we know what's going on, and we stand with one another. I think the Women's March on Washington is going to be one example of how communities from diverse faiths who stand to be impacted by the policies and legislation that could be proposed under the next administration, these communities can come together and say that, we're not going to be disregarded, we're not going to let our voices be marginalized. And I think that moving forward, that's something that we just have to be very vigilant about. We can't let hatred and intolerance and bigotry be louder than the voices that are demanding peace, intolerance, and acceptance, and the more just aspects of our nation that we want to push forward. We've also been building coalitions with other civil rights organizations. So CARE reached out to ACLU, Maryland, Casa, Maryland, and I forget there's a fourth organization. It'll come to me probably later. But we're building coalitions because we know that there's strength in numbers. And your voice, never underestimate the value and the power of your voice. You might think it's just you and it's just a click or a hashtag or it's one person saying something, but never underestimate the impact that you can have in your individual capacity to help bring about change. And I think a lot of times what prevents people from reaching out when they would otherwise reach out is the fear of the unknown. Like for example, I've had people tell me that they want to reach out to Muslims, but they've never met a Muslim before, and they don't know where to start. And I can tell you that we are very similar to people who are not Muslims. And hopefully there's nobody in this room who's never met a Muslim, but there are studies that show that there are people in the United States, many of whom probably have voted for our current next president-elect, who have never met a Muslim, and so they're afraid to reach out, or they're reluctant to reach out. And I can tell you we enjoy many of the same things that many of you guys do, and we want the same things out of life as everybody else. So don't be reluctant to reach out to people who might be different than you. Be politically engaged. There has never been a more important time for us to be politically and civically engaged. Whether it's volunteering at your candidate's office whose views reflects your values, or whether it's supporting candidates who reflect what you espouse or what the values that you hold dear, or whether it's you running for office yourself. If you don't feel like your candidates on a local level reflect the ideals and values that you want, then people think age is not an obstacle, experience is not an obstacle. I think the most important thing is you have to have passion, right? You have to believe in the vision that you want to put forth, and you have to sell that vision to other people. Don't be afraid to run for office. Don't be afraid to get engaged politically, and be the change that you want to see in our country. So I'm going to wrap up with that because I know we're pressed for time, but I wanted to just share this quote by Lila Watson, who is an Aboriginal elder. She said, "If you have come here to help me, you are wasting our time. But if you have come here because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together." And we're ready to work together. Our sleeves are rolled up. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Zainab. And Next we have somebody who is a reverend, a community activist, an organizer to get young people to vote, an inspiration to people in the environmental community, one of our dear friends in the anti-war community. I don't know how he does it all, but it's Reverend Lennox Yearwood. Can you please give him a big hand?
Let me first start off by, let me just say, isn't CodePink amazing? Come on, y'all. I love watching the hearings last week, and every minute, it's just like, man, this is fantastic. I love it. Let me also just say that for all those who don't think we like business as progressive, give it up for Andy Shalal, y'all. Andy Shalal, who shows you can treat your workers fairly, have good food, healthy food, and an environment for people to gather. And you can grow. That's very important. This is not a drill. This is not a game. This is really happening. It's going down. And we as a movement need to be ready to do everything that we can do to stop it. This is fascism. This president, in the words of John Lewis, and I agree, is illegitimate. Right. And before I get into kind of where we are with the climate change movement, let me say this to the progressive movement. First, while I love a number of the things that President Obama did, even received the White House Champion of Change Award from the White House, you can still be critical of those in office, no matter if they are an R or a D. You don't need to check your morality at the door. So when things are going wrong, you don't need to become wishful now, because there were a lot of things that weren't right during the Obama administration as well. I can tell by the spattering of claps that's still hard to get over. That's still hard to. Let me go into how do we get here? Today is Dr. King's actual birthday today, and he would have been 88 years old today. I wonder, Reverend Hagler, if he would have survived the assassination attempt in Memphis. If when the first attempt on his life in New York, and he said that I had just sneezed, and he survived the one in Memphis and was still here today, would we as a movement still regard his work as valuable? Would we be still taking care of the elderly activists who fought the way in the 60s and 50s and 70s? Would we be able to tell what Donald Trump said to John Lewis, that is just all talk? What would be the case right now? And what I would want to say is that in 1968, when Dr. King was assassinated, Donald Trump was graduating from the Wharton School of Business. He then left there to take over his father's business and received millions of dollars to do so. In that, he learned from folks like Robert Moses how to build causeways through the Bronx, how to redline and become a slum leader to black and brown people, and how to disregard and use policy for his own gain. How not to pay people and how to get to where he was by cheating and scamming people. So let's be clear of where he was in 1968 and how he got here and how we got here. What we know from then is that Dr. King spoke out against Goldwater in 64. And he said then that if we allow for folks like Goldwater, he himself may not be a racist, but he creates the umbrella of racism that allows for a number of people in this country to rise up against the others. And if we as a movement don't work against the Goldwaters, we as a movement will be in trouble. Now, LBJ won an election, but we do know that another law and order president, Nixon, won in 68. He used what was going on at that time, very similar to the Black Lives Matter movement, to raise up his own profile to come into office. What is very powerful with Nixon, what we can learn from our own movement, from a climate change movement, is that our movement didn't stop even though Nixon was elected in 68. As a matter of fact, the first Earth Day in 70, we pushed for the EPA. We pushed for the Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act. We pushed harder than we ever pushed before. What we do know is that after a time goes past and Nixon goes off on his speech, that one of the things there is that after that component, what we see is that our movement begins to change and we don't become consolidated. This is very important because even though our climate movement should have been unified, we saw what those were doing in Warren County regarding landfills and with environmental injustice. We saw that happening. The movement began to splinter. And that's one of the first lessons we learned is that we cannot win as a segregated, progressive movement. We cannot win as a siloed movement when we begin to have silos within our own movement. Let me fast forward to when the movement began to think as a climate change movement that we can be simply a political think tank and not have a street gang. So we began to think of cap and trade, the Markey-Waxman bill in 2010 in Copenhagen. And in that process, we suffered defeat and tremendous losses. But it was in 2010 that our movement began to rise up when we began to say, listen, what is happening with the climate is so disastrous that we as human beings must stand up. We must hold Chevron, or many call Chevron, accountable. We must hold BP accountable. We must hold Rex Tillerson in his former job at Exxon accountable. These are the things that we as a movement must do because it is literally not a movement of equality, but a movement of existence. And we begin to organize and mobilize throughout, not only domestically, but internationally. And so our movement became broad, not just through the 50 states of America, but we as a movement began to link our movement to the struggles of those across the globe. That must happen again right now. Yeah. If we are to be successful, we cannot only view this administration as an administration for this country, but its effects what will happen around the globe. Now, let me just say where we are now, bring it current to how our movement has risen up and the reason why billionaires are taking a pay cut to fight us in the streets. The reality is this: we as a movement post-2010 begin to gain ground. And we begin to grow our movement, black, white, brown, yellow, and more importantly, the indigenous community. We begin to change our tactic from just being carbon part per million in the atmosphere to begin to say, many will Chaudry, water is life. Clean air now. We begin to change forward on climate, act on climate, and we did the first thing. We held the current president accountable and Secretary of State Clinton accountable regarding the Keystone XL pipeline. Once we showed we were willing to go against even those who are our friends, then our enemies became very afraid of us at that moment. Once we showed that we would fight against the Keystone XL pipeline and win, put our bodies on the line, go to jail, that then throw a shudder through Exxon, to the point that Rex Tillerson, Scott Pruitt, Donald Trump have quit their day job to try to fight us in the streets. So we are winning. And even now, in a patch in North Dakota called Standing Rock, where some children went in April and some elders followed, we have tanks and dogs. We have policemen from all districts fighting us because they know that this moment humanity is on the line. Now what's at stake now? What's at stake is this. There are farmers in India who are drowning themselves and committing suicide. There are children in Africa who can't take the heat who are also drowning themselves. There are wildfires in California and droughts and floods at the same time. There's so much going on and they don't care. But we do, because we know their business plan was a death sentence for us. So we, the people, the true people, are now rising up to these billionaires and saying this madness must stop now. Yeah. And so this weekend, know that we are winning. Know that. It may not look like it. They're doing their tricks and dog and pony show to fool on racism. But know that we are winning. And know that come January 20th, the movement will finally bring this madness to an end and fight for future generations. Power to the people.
Thank you, Reverend Yearwood. We're going to hear now from a woman who is a feminist, an attorney, an activist, and has been very, very busy during this election season. And that is the president of the National Organization for Women, Terry O'Neill.
Thank you, Medea, for calling this together. Thank you, Andy, for having us here. And Reverend Yearwood, I knew I shouldn't go after you. I knew that was a big mistake for me. Do this. Can we? The mic is not. Oh, how about like this?
There you go.
Okay, how does this work better? Yeah. Okay, good. So I don't want to take up a lot of time. I do want to say, I want to talk a little bit about how we got here. How we got here is because of white voters, right?
Yeah.
Let me just say, first off, to all of the African American sisters and brothers in this room, all of the Latinx sisters and brothers in this room, all of the Arab Americans and the Asian Americans, the Native Americans, and the Jewish Americans in this room, I apologize. On behalf of the 53% of white women and the 63% of white men, the 80% of white evangelicals who voted to put Nazis in the White House of the United States of America. In a grotesque act of betrayal of our country's most basic values, not only of democracy, but of decency and honor and integrity. Not just Nazis, but kleptocratic Nazi white nationalists. Steve Bannon is proud of his Nazi agenda, of supporting the Nazi agenda. So when I say that this country, white voters in this country, voted to put Nazis in the White House, that's what I'm talking about.
Right.
89% of African American voters, and 2/3 of Latinx voters, and 2/3 of Asian American voters voted for the progressive, inclusive, multicultural agenda offered by the Democratic Party and Hillary Clinton, including people who had qualms about whether we could be progressive enough, whether the Democrats would be progressive enough. They voted, they saw their way clear to doing that, but not the white voters. And for that, I, as a white woman, I had a friend of mine who's white who told me 2 days after the election, she said, you know, I never knew that shame was one of the stages of grief. But I know that now. So I'm here to apologize. And I'm also here to acknowledge some of the things that we're up against as a result of the outcome of this election that is going to happen to us. And let me just say parenthetically, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by 3 million votes, and we should never forget that. We are in the majority in this country. The Electoral College was taken by Donald Trump. Why? Well, partly because of voter suppression in Florida, in North Carolina, in Ohio, in Wisconsin, and in Michigan. And in all of those states, the voter suppression looks different in every single state. In North Carolina, the voter suppression law, which was characterized by the Federal Appeals Court as being it was with surgical precision aimed at African American voters. That law was declared unconstitutional, and yet the court's order was disregarded in many precincts clear across the state. Same thing happened in Wisconsin, where the voter ID law was declared unconstitutional, and in precinct after precinct after precinct, the election officials disregarded the federal court's order. In Michigan, the voter suppression looked a little bit different. Why? Because Detroit is under occupation right now.
That's right.
A city manager appointed by the Republican governor. The mayor has no real power. The elected mayor, the elected city council have no power. So what happens in Michigan? The crappiest, most decrepit, most broken down voting machines ended up in Detroit. To the point where 75,000 ballots cast in Detroit were declared spoiled because the machines couldn't read them. It is highly likely that a good number of those 75,000 so-called spoiled ballots could have been read by human beings if an audit of that vote had been permitted. 75,000 ballots spoiled, and Donald Trump takes the entire state of Michigan by 10,000 votes. So when we look at what we're up against here, one thing we need to keep very clear in our minds is that the people really are with us. The people who actually wanted to vote and were allowed to vote, I think, voted on our side. And we need to keep that in mind, because this is what we're up against, and this is what we will have to resist and obstruct and deny. Following. Paul Ryan of Wisconsin, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, is finally going to get his dream of privatizing Social Security, converting Medicare into a private voucher system, and demolishing Medicaid by making it part of a block grant system entirely up to the states to administer. Oh, no, exactly. Title IX, the education law that requires all federally funded, all schools that get any kind of federal funding must provide an equal educational opportunity to girls and women as well as men and boys. That law could be gutted. The defunding of Planned Parenthood. The defunding of Planned Parenthood is intended to take place along with the defunding of Title X family planning clinics generally, right? These are clinics that provide STD screenings and treatments, and breast cancer screenings, and contraception. And in some cases, by no means all cases, some of these clinics do provide abortion care or referrals for abortion care. And make no mistake, 1 in 3 of us, 1 in 3 women will have an abortion by the age of 45. It is a common, necessary aspect of women's reproductive health care. It should be included and covered like any other form of health care. These are the things that we stand to lose, and who will lose the most? It is our sisters of color that will lose the most from these kinds of policies. In 2014, 15, statistics were released globally about maternal mortality. The United States was the only country, practically the only country on the planet to see an increase in maternal mortality. Those were numbers that went from 2005, I believe, until 2012. Increase in maternal mortality. Virtually all of that increase was due to an increase experienced by African American women in our country. And the reason for that is lack of access to health care generally. And when we talk about health care, and we talk about repealing the Affordable Care Act, we are talking about taking away health care and health insurance from the women who need it most. And who put these people in office to be able to do that? That would be white voters.
Right.
Who are not going to... Sorry?
You can't afford it. Premiums went up.
The
use the insurance.
We'll have time later.
Yeah. Obamacare absolutely needs to be fixed, and the answer to it is not to make the premiums triple and quadruple and be completely unaffordable for women and their families. And that is what will happen under the Republican plan for Obamacare. Make no mistake.
That's right.
Right. Okay. Now, what are we doing about it? Well, how many of you have heard about the Women's March? I am so proud to be a part of this march. I am so grateful to the march co-chairs who stepped up to organize and lead this march. Tamika Mallory, Linda Sarsour, Carmen Perez, and Bob Bland, Roberta Bland, all from New York, all who are doing heroic work. As the leader of the National Organization for Women, I could not be more proud to stand as an ally behind the leadership of these remarkable women of color. Because make no mistake, it is the women of color who voted the right way in this election, and the white women did not. Okay, I just want to close by saying that as we resist and struggle against this incoming administration, we need to remember no one can do everything, right? Everyone can do something. The National Organization for Women, following the Women's March, of course, right now, this week, we're going to be busy helping to organize stuff for the march. We will be focusing on protecting women's access to reproductive health care that is key to women's ability to survive, let alone to participate fully as equals in our society. We will never go back. We will fight back. But in addition and equally, we will be fighting for voting rights in community after community and state after state, because the only way for us to win our policies in this country is to start winning some elections. And let's be clear, it's our brothers and sisters of color who are eligible to vote, who want to vote, who are not being permitted to vote. They're the ones that will elect the progressives that will help all of us. Yeah. So we know where we need to put our energies, and we are going to be working to secure voting rights throughout the country and stop the voter suppression aimed at communities of color. And that is what we are doing for all women in this country. January 26th or 27th is the
26th.
No, that's the anti-abortion march.
Yeah, we got to stop them on the streets at the street.
Well, I don't know. We'll talk about that.
So we have another speaker who nobody wants to go after him. Because the fire just comes out of this guy that we love so much. And Reverend Grayland Hagler is the minister at the Plymouth Congregational United Church of Christ. He is always busy organizing, but especially busy now after this election, not wasting one moment getting the faith-based community organized, getting the rest of the communities organized, He is running around with all kinds of ideas about how to bring us together and how to fire us up for the time ahead. So let's give a hand to Grayland.
Thank you, Medea. And good evening, everyone. And I want to also just sort of take my continual hat off to CodePink for all of the ways in which CodePink continues to agitate and to make us all feel that someone and someones are engaging in such a way that the system needs to be engaged. And I want to also again thank Andy Shalal, Busboys and Poets, for opening their doors and their space so that we can be here. Last Sunday night, we were at a church where we held a rally and service called Love Over Hate, a season of resistance. And we brought together folks from various communities, the Jewish community, the Muslim community, the Christian community, the theist community, those who weren't too sure about God, and everybody else got in the room, and we basically talked and spoke, and people felt empowered and inspired, particularly because we made sure that there was a segment in which people could be engaged in the kinds of movements that were going to go on, the kinds of resistance that was going to go on, and so that people could become a part of that, because that's what we're doing. And this comes out of a natural thing, because in the end of November to the beginning of December, I took black preachers to Palestine. And we were there, and we had this time to reflect about what was going on there and what was going on at home here. And to see the similarities, and to see not only the similarities, but the real issue is that nobody wants to acknowledge the race and the racism that exists in both places, the white supremacy that exists in both places. And the fact is that really this country has a continual sin, and I don't know why any of us are surprised, and that sin is called racism. And that sin is a sin that we want to keep silent around, and we want to call it something else. We want to call it classism, or we want to call it the fact that some schools are deficient and other schools are efficient. But why do you think some schools are deficient and other schools are efficient? It's still based on race more than it's based on class. Sisters and brothers, remember this. We are in the midst of the take-back of a reconstruction. I want you to understand that. 1868, after the Civil War, the fact is that there were groups that emerged called the White Shirts and the Red Shirts and the Invisible Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, and they agitated, and their sole mission was to disrupt the Reconstruction agenda and to carry that on and to threaten every single politician that stood on the side of Reconstruction until they had an election in 1876, a contested election between Tilden and Hayes, and a compromise was made that Hayes went to the White House with the agreement that he would withdraw the last remaining Union troops from the South, and therefore no longer would one person, one vote be guaranteed. And we saw again the birth of Jim Crow and segregation as a reality that gripped the country from 1876 on up until the Voting Rights Act. And so that was a reconstruction. And I'm going to tell you something, is that let's be honest about this. Most of the white folks in mid-America, in the Rust Belt, they looked at a black family going to the White House, whether that black family was progressive or not. But they looked at a black family going into the White House, and people really believed that the White House should be the White House. And there was a black family that went there, and immediately we saw the reactions that we saw in 1876.
That's right.
1868. And that was the emergence of groups like the Tea Party that began to raid every town hall meeting and back up every candidate, whip the hell out of every candidate, threaten and intimidate every candidate until they were able to put into place obstructionists to basically try to resist any type of forward movement that people wanted in this country. And I'm going to tell you the truth. They were successful. They kicked our ass. I can say it a Sunday evening.
Yes, sir.
They kicked our ass because we fell into and we continued in this neo-liberal kind of paradigm where it's about a candidate, but it's not about issues. It's about a two-party system where the majority of voters tend to be independent in this country. And we still feed into that model over and over again, one way or another, and we miss the reality is that it should be predicated upon issues.
Right.
And y'all got to get out of your middle-class suburban attitudes and take off your damn gloves and threaten some candidates out there.
Yeah! Come on.
And threaten some politicians out there.
All right. Come on.
I'm going to tell you the truth from my heart. We are in a revolutionary situation. If we don't realize that we are in a revolutionary situation, we've just been asleep and we're still asleep.
That's right.
Folk on the other side saw what they were doing as a revolution in order to take the country back, which was the same mantra they used in 1868 to take the country back from northern aggression, and that's the same one that they're using now. They understand that it's a revolution, but do we understand that it's a revolution? That we need to engage in agitation, we need to engage in disrupting business as usual. We do it for 4 years, we do it as long as it takes until we basically break the back of this system and bring justice into being. It's up to us. That's what we were talking about last Sunday night, was a season of resistance. That is not just going to happen on Inauguration Day or the day after, but it needs to continue the week after, and the month after, and month after that, and after that, and after that. Because see, the fact is we're engaged right now in a protracted struggle. And those who win are basically simply folk who can stand one day longer than the opposition. That's our duty right now, is to stand and stand up for justice, and stand up for our sisters and brothers, to stand up for our neighbors, and to stand up as long as it takes until justice is won. There's a scripture that says, when you sow the wind, you shall reap the whirlwind. This nation has sown the wind, and it's going to reap the whirlwind. And we need to understand that things, as bad as they seem right now, they can get worse. Because you have fascist folk who are at the helm, money-grubbing folks who are at the helm, and the sisters and brothers, that's going to be the biggest theft of all time. When white America wake up, they're going to realize that everything was stolen, even their grandmama was stolen out of the grave. Why do you think a billionaire is going to give up making millions of money to take over a department other than he's getting ready to steal something? Don't y'all understand that? He's getting ready to steal something. And he's going to steal our communities, our neighborhoods, going to steal everything. Or put somebody in charge of education who basically is only objective is to privatize education.
Go ahead.
Is to privatize a sacred and a public trust, or a fossil fuel, whatever it is, fool, going into the Secretary of State. For what reason? Ask yourself these questions. Ask over. It is a takeover of the country. Putin, Trump, Netanyahu, white supremacists reigning all over the world and coming together in a coalition with which to do us plenty of damage right now.
Yeah, same man.
I know somebody's going to be ticked and pissed at me for saying this, for talking about Israel, for talking about Netanyahu. If you're ticked at me, that's okay, because I'm from Baltimore. I know how to fight. You know, I'm just lifting this up because we have got to be engaged in disrupting this system. Disrupting it. In the Free South Africa movement. In the Free South Africa movement, it got to the point where we started talking about, and in South Africa started talking about making the Bantu stands ungovernable. Some of y'all were around long enough to remember that phrase being put out. You were there? Okay, yes, ma'am. And what they meant was to disrupt it so that business could not take place, that the white minority government could not rule with ease, that business was disrupted, that the flow of commerce was disrupted, that the political intercourse was disrupted. And so I'm going to appeal to us in this season of our resistance that we got to make our cities ungovernable, our neighborhoods ungovernable, our school systems ungovernable. Every place where people gather, we've got to have a militant voice that's pushing people up against the wall and demanding a progressive form of justice to come out of people's mouths and to intimidate them and to push folk until we get to that place where justice is actually something that becomes a mantra in this country.
Yeah.
Preachers supposed to be nonviolent. I believe in nonviolence. I believe in nonviolent resistance. Folks get caught up in talking about nonviolence and they forget the resistance part. The resistance part is that you go into some place to agitate and to create a crisis, and that means, you know, if you're gonna make some scrambled eggs, you got to break the shell. People always get worried about whether they're going to offend somebody or whether they're going to offend that person or that person being offended. And please understand why I'm doing it. I know why I'm doing it. You need to understand why I'm doing it. I don't need to bend over backwards to try to get you to a place where you understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. I need to be able to stand up and break the eggs of silence and apathy, and to break the eggs of business as usual, and to begin to scramble them all together so that folks begin to understand that we are dead serious about bringing a new world in existence, dead serious about changing the way government relates to people, dead serious about changing the way institutions relate to people, dead serious about dealing with this gentrification issue that's driving poor people out of D.C. and every major system, that we got to be serious about agitating and making this revolutionary situation come alive and come alive for us. Will you continue to struggle? Will you be in the streets?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Will you march?
Yes.
Will you sit in?
Yes.
Will you shout out?
Yes.
Will you get in somebody's face?
Oh, yeah.
That's what we need to do. And I'm going to sit down on this, but I want to say to everybody that, you know, those are, and I always say this to my young folks very often, if you engage in, I'm going to use an old word, courtship.
Wow.
And somebody is taking you out on a date, or you're going out on a date, you look at them and say, first of all, who'd you vote for? First of all, who'd you vote for? Right? The date is on or off predicated upon that answer. And then what is your position on race and on justice and on defeating sexism once and for all? And what is your position on driving these demonic dogs out of office and saving our country for the spirit of justice and hope? Ask that question and get an answer. God bless
you. So what is amazing is all the groups that have come up, some of them brand new, with all kinds of new ideas about how to address the situation we're in. Raise your hand if you've heard of a new group called Indivisible. So some of you have. Raise your hand if you haven't. Most of you haven't. So we have somebody here representing that group. It was hard to get someone here because they're working so hard. They're not out talking to people in groups like this. They are organizing. So let's thank and give a hand to Salvador Martinez for coming here tonight to talk.
I'm so grateful to have a minute out of this amazing panel to share a little bit of a report back from the dozens of volunteers that have been giving up a lot of their free time to respond to all of the energy that we're getting back to a guide that we put online about 1 month ago called Indivisible. It's a practical guide for resisting the Trump agenda. And at this point, it's really not a story about 12 or 30 people up in a Petworth living room. And it's not even a story about what's particularly in the guide. It's about the response of people across every state and every congressional district that are picking it up and putting it in their toolbox. For folks
They know what the guide is.
Yeah, for folks who haven't had a chance to see it, and I do have a couple friends here who are going to help hand out a brief summary. But it essentially has a simple message. We heard about the Tea Party, the way that they won. I still remember 2010. I'm not from DC originally. The first time I came here, I was with the movement to get comprehensive immigration reform. We had a supermajority. We had the first term of the Obama presidency, and we believed that that and many other of our shared priorities were just around the corner. And another force was taking shape that would really frustrate that effort, and that partly was the Tea Party. So we're not here to say that we should replicate the racism of the Tea Party, or the disregard that they had for basic facts, or the physical violence that they were willing to apply in different settings. But there is one ingredient of their success that we can splice out of their playbook and use right back against the very slim majority that's taking power in Congress and this presidency that barely got over the number that they needed. And that is to organize locally and to pull on one lever that is so obvious that sometimes we forget. We call the 3 representatives that each of us have, our 2 senators that are 1 congressperson, and we do it in a way that works and that's effective and that's coordinated, and we show up at the town halls and we make the phone calls, and all of that is outlined in the guide. So I could stand here and tell you about the 4.2 million people that have downloaded it, or the 3,000 groups that have already signed up to do that. But there, there's cat videos on the internet that get that many views. So I think that what speaks even more powerfully to what's out there and the energy that's out there to take on these tools is that we are not just seeing this in Politico or in the New York Times. We're also seeing it in the letters page of my hometown in Kingston, New York, where somebody said, I read the guide, it works, when on the first day of the 115th Congress, they tried to hamstring the Congressional Ethics Office. There was a little group in Roanoke, Virginia that showed up at their representative's district office and gave a simple message that it was unacceptable. There are much bigger fights ahead, and I hope you'll take a look at the website and hopefully join us in continuing to use that power. Thanks.
So, Salvador, I don't know if you mentioned that this was an initiative started by former staff members from Congress who know how the Tea Party worked, who know the pressure that their members of Congress got. And the guide is brilliant. If you haven't read it, read it. It's beautifully written, it's easy reading, and it's really kind of a step-by-step playbook about how to put pressure on your representative in a way that is in your face, but without the meanness of the Tea Party. So, I know, you gotta still read the guide, and you gotta contact your friends and relatives in other places. Before I open this up to, where do they get the guide?
So it's indivisibleguide.com.
Indivisibleguide.com. So before we open up to questions, is there anyone else, like we had Salvador from Endalon? Salvador, are you still here? National Day Labor Organizing Committee. Salvador, can you maybe say what you all are doing and give a hand to Salvador and the Day Labor Organizing Network?
Hi everybody, my name is Salvador and I work with the National Day Labor Organizing Network, and I think for us, I'll just make 2 very quick points. I think it would be great to have a conversation, and much respect to all the compañeros and compañeras. So for us, we're a national network that works with day laborers, and I think, when we think about what's coming, it's really clear, when they say they're going to target like the criminal immigrants, for Jeff Sessions, the possible next AG, he considers worker centers that hire day laborers, immigrant undocumented day laborers, criminal enterprises, right? And so I think one thing that's very clear to us is that it's coming, and they're coming for a lot of our brothers and sisters. So it's really going to take, I mean, literally folks need to know who are the vulnerable people in their communities and start doing the connections, start making those connections. And whether that means, you know, we're asking some of our partners to host like local, I mean, this is what we're asking folks to do, and introduce yourselves. Where are your day laborer corners? Where are your mosques? Where are your brothers and sisters that are going to be targeted? That's one, they're coming, and our local lines of defense are going to be, our best lines of defense are going to be local, right? A lot of the stuff that we're putting up for in defense of the day laborer centers and whatnot is going to be on Alto Trump. It's kind of like the Alto Arizona, the Not One More platforms that were very much open source, places to share resources. That's the main thing. That's first. Second, very specifically here to DC, you know, the folks that were, you know, didn't have too many bones in their arms before the election, didn't all of a sudden grow bones in their arms, right? And so a lot of the folks that needed to be pushed 2 months ago still need to be pushed, right? And just because they say they're anti-Trump, it doesn't always mean the same thing. And so very specifically right now in DC, for example, everybody likes to say they're a sanctuary, you know, they support sanctuary now. Let's be very clear. The sanctuary policy in DC today and for what's coming is weak sauce, right? It's not strong enough, and they make big fat exceptions for any criminal nexus. And in a Trump era, that was not acceptable under Obama, and we called him on that, and we have to double down in a Trump era where the city of Washington, D.C. today is making exceptions and has transferred many people, and it's regular at this point, transferred people to ICE with the excuse that because they have some criminal nexus. That's bullshit. That's an excuse, and even if there is a criminal nexus, there's another fucked up system for that. You don't have to conflate the two fucked up systems, right? And so what's coming here in DC is that we're all going to need to send a message. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize for that. But there's two separate systems, and let's not conflate the two messed up systems that we're confronting. But I will say that that message needs to be given to the mayor, and that's coming, that the policy in DC cannot make exceptions for anybody. We don't poke holes in our Constitution. We don't make exceptions for our neighbors. No exceptions, no collusion with immigration enforcement in DC. And if we're going to be revising it, we need to include no collusion with a Muslim registry and everything else. We need to be on the ball in that. So alto Trump, fuera ICE. Thank you.
So some of you, when you came in, were asking how can you meet up with CodePink on Inauguration Day to protest and the Women's March. So Ariel Gold will tell you about it, and give her a round of applause for all the hard work she's been doing.
So many of you saw what we've been up to in the halls of Congress last week. Well, we're going to bring that same energy to inauguration and to the Women's March to let Trump and his administration know what kind of resistance we are going to bring. When they bring hatred, we will counter it with love and with peace and with pure resistance for the world that we want to live in. So we invite you to join us on January 20th at 7 o'clock in the morning. We will be at Union Station to begin with. We will be doing the 1 Billion Rising Flash Mob Dance, which is to end violence against women. That's systematic and personal violence. Then we'll be participating in inauguration activities. At 6 o'clock p.m., we will be in front of the Walter E. Washington Convention Center, also doing the 1 Billion Rising Dance. And we will be welcoming Trump and his administration as they are going to their official balls. So we'll be letting them know what we plan to bring to their hatred. On the 21st, we'll be gathering at 200 Constitution on the steps of the Hubert Humphrey, 200 Independents on the steps of the Hubert Humphrey building. We invite you to join us for all of this. You can find details and sign up. Once you sign up, you'll get emails and text messages from us. You can do that at codepink.org/sign-up. facebook.com/inauguration. Join us!
Hey Ariel, how will they find us? How will they find us, Medea?
So go on to the CodePink.org website.
Well, look for the pink banners. And
We are near impossible to miss wherever we go. We will have pink banners and flags and lots of pink, be wearing lots of pink. So look around, keep an eye out for us, and rise, love, and resist with us.
Men are most welcome, and you do not have to dance. All right, there are a couple of other organizers who asked for a chance to say what they're doing because organizing is the most important thing right now. But if you can make it quick, raise your hands if you wanted to say something about an action, a strategy, a group.
Joey Johnson on behalf of RefuseFascism.org. Listen, everything people have said up here tonight has been extremely compelling. There are millions and millions of lives in the balance. And when you think about the fact that Trump is a climate change denier and that he's got his finger on the nuclear weapons and he's a bellicose militarist, we're talking about billions of lives are at stake. We have to stop this. Refuse Fascism is talking about get into the streets and stay in the streets. Don't let these fascists come to power to begin with. We have 5 days before the inauguration. This needs to grow like Tahrir Square, every night meeting at McPherson Square, getting in the streets and staying in the streets, growing from the thousands to the tens of thousands to the millions that can create a crisis where every faction in the ruling elite of this country has to respond. There's plenty of things that Trump could be indicted for. What's missing is the millions that need to be in the street. Go to refusefascism.org, find out about it. Let's make this happen. We have to do this. We have to do this in our millions.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move to discussion questions. Please raise your hand. Ty will pass around the mic, and please be quick with your questions so we can get a lot of them.
Hi, sure. So Sergey Kostin with CodePink, and I thank the entire panel, but especially Reverend Hagler also for his words of spirit, actually. And I probably relate most to Reverend Hagler also. So my question is, with regard to how, and I came in here late, so I apologize for that. How do we combine our efforts even further? Because what I hear are still many opposing ideas here. And what I mean by that is, if this were a Hillary discussion right now, because CodePink would be here at this point if Hillary had won, doing the same thing. But overall, most of the people in this room probably would not have been here for that same discussion. So my question is, how do we really combine efforts and get through the mind blocks that we have with these two systems, as Reverend Hagler had put to us, that really are the same thing. We all know that. But yet we still have this idea somehow in our minds that the Democrats are somehow better. Perhaps they are, to some marginal degree. But it's still a marginal degree that's the case. And until we get through that point, we will not be really in a space and time that we can really come together and work as groups need to work, whether it be indivisible or what have you. So the question is, how do we get to that point? We understand from how do we get there?
Well, I think that part of it is an attitudinal shift, right? And just like you pointed out earlier, folks operating in their silos and all those other types of things, that's an attitudinal shift that we got to have. We got to recognize that we are intricately linked to each other, right? The environmental issue, those who are working on racial justice, those who are working around Islamophobia, those who are working on women's issues, it's all the same issues. I mean, that's the first thing, to begin that attitudinal shift. The other thing is and it comes down also to issues, bringing those issues together. Because if folks would have whipped up and beat the hell out of the Democratic Party, the Democrats might have been elected. They played it safe. They took us for granted. They took no risks. They spoke about nothing that was going to bring any passion into people's hearts. And so it was a passionless movement. And it wasn't a movement at all. It was basically trying to do political business. Right?
Defeated Bernie.
Yes.
Right.
Right. Let me go back to what I'm saying. Because see, that's the problem, is we're jumping into personalities. Because the issue is the issues. And that's what I keep coming back to, is the issue is how we construct the issues and then make people who are running for office deal with our issues rather than coming at it the other way around, where we get behind a personality and hope that they will have something to say about our issues. They're never going to have anything to say about our issues because they're going to go the path of least resistance. It's going to happen every single time. And so that's why it comes down in terms of building that tapestry of issues, looking at the intersectionality of all of our struggles and bringing them together, and building our own people's platform and holding folks accountable to that platform. And if they don't adhere to that platform, then they commit political suicide.
And I just want to add, the national Democrats are one thing, but at the local community level, we should be looking to elect people who will support our issues of whatever party they may belong to. So yeah, I want to say we absolutely stick to issues. Also, years ago, in the late 1990s, a number of cities began forming. I happened to be in New Orleans at the time, and it was called the Community Labor United. That was a community-wide coalition of labor groups, women's rights organizations, domestic workers, the music industry, civil rights, LGBTQ rights, all the churches, the mosques, and the synagogues all getting together to work together toward a common purpose. And it was the organizing of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was actually done by a couple of individuals who had been with SNCC back in their younger days. That's possible to do now. And if we work at the community level, showing up for one another. So as active for women's rights, I was active for women's rights. I worked with labor groups, worked with civil rights groups, and we did manage to show up for each other. That's what we have to do. It's really not about party.
I think that this point that Terry just made about working locally is more important now than ever. It's been important for a long time. But what we face now is a reality that we don't have access to change agents at the federal level right now. And that means we have to build our movements, not looking at the members of Congress we can influence today, but looking at strengthening our movements. I don't think I agree that if Clinton had won that we wouldn't be in this room. I think there's a lot of people who fought against the Obama deportations. There's a lot of people who fought against Obama's wars. We would have been already working on fighting against Clinton's wars. So I don't think that is what helps us. But we do have to recognize this is a different period, not just because of the people elected, but because of the movements they have empowered. That's right. The movements they have legalized. The movements they have given a credential to go out in the streets, not just with homophobic and racist and anti-Semitic and Islamophobic and racist, misogynist language, but to do things based on that language. So that when we have women whose hijab is being pulled off their head, when we have women who are being frightened on the streets, when we have African American communities who are facing not only police violence, but the threat of violence from empowered white people who think that because their guy is in the White House, and their guy is now the national top advisor, whatever his title is, that they have the right to do this stuff. It means, and I think that the good news is, everybody's getting this. That part of our work, whether we work on environmental justice, whether we work on the women's movement, whether we work on Palestine, whatever we work on, it has to start with protection of the most vulnerable among us. So that we're already doing a lot of that work. The fact that we talk routinely now about the environmental justice movement, that's based on environmental racism and an understanding of the links between racism and environmental degradation. The fact that we all are saying we stand with Standing Rock is about understanding that this was about not only Native American rights and the struggle against racism and the struggle for the environment, but it's also about the struggle for international law, the struggle to go for diplomacy rather than war, whether it's within the United States or externally in the rest of the world, that all of these things are in fact connected. And the good news is we're starting to get that. The harder part is none of this happens by itself. And it's that notion that we have to fight to make the arc of history turn towards justice. It ain't going to do it on its own.
So one of the things to your, yes, definitely, Phyllis. Your question is layered. And so I want to make sure I respond in a way that it doesn't discount anything you heard, but helps us as a movement to go forward. Yes, as a matter of fact, if you could kind of put aside for a second the military-industrial complex, put aside the racism for a second, but as a movement, let's start with the fact that we know that organized people beat organized money every single time. But in organizing people, our movement must deal with the fact that our movement is controlled by entities outside of those that are actually for the people we are fighting for. There is a nonprofit industrial complex. And in that nonprofit industrial complex, they are funding folks and making folks put them in silos so they only work for who they think they need to do for the moment. On top of that, he who funds you is he who controls you. And so a lot of organizations are taking money from the same folks they are looking at fighting. You can't take money from the fossil fuel industry and then go out here to people and say you're fighting against environmental racism. You can't take money from Lockheed Martin and the military industrial complex and then come out here and say you're fighting against wars. You can't do that. So for us, you can't be in a position where our policies are inflicting pain from the Middle East to Honduras. So if you're a climate activist and they are assassinating Berta Cáceres, and we're looking at that, then we are complicit if we're not speaking out for the Berta Cáceres who are being assassinated by our government or being implicit in that process. So the thing here for us is that where we are as a movement, now, and I just want to make sure I be clear, I'm excited. I don't want you to say, man, Red was it's hard. I'm not, that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying, my days as an Air Force officer, I was struck in that institution of the Air Force, how much did they put things on discipline. I'm also struck at sometimes in a progressive movement how we are undisciplined in our movement and how we kind of go up and down, and we're not building institutional structures to create resources and infrastructure. I'm also struck that when we have movements like Occupy Wall Street and Black Lives Matter, that these young folks are literally, in some cases, don't have money to eat, don't have money to live. And then we have nonprofits who are paying themselves sometimes $250,000 a year while you have folks in the streets who can't even afford to live. That is not solidarity. That is not love. And so if our movement is really going to go forward, then we have to love one another. And finally, we cannot be a movement that's usatory. Yes, we stand with Standing Rock. Yes, we stand with Flint, but it just can't be an op-ed and then we leave them when we're finished. Standing with somebody means that even after the cameras are gone, we are still standing in solidarity with the people in the streets. They saw it in Katrina with New Orleans. They saw it in New York with Sandy. They see it all over the world that we show up when the camera's there, but when the cameras leave, they see it in Ferguson. They see it in Baltimore. They see it in Charleston. When the cameras leave, we leave. We have a problem with too many commentators in our movement. So we need to be there with the people to love them. So when they die, we die. When they live, we live. When they go up, we go up. And when they go down, we go down. But we stand there in solidarity as a powerful people force.
Is there a woman who wants to ask a question or a comment?
Okay. With regard to the standing together in solidarity, with respect to Islamophobia, I'm struck by the example of the King of Denmark, who, when the Nazis required all Jews in Denmark to put on the yellow star, the king came out with a yellow star on his jacket, and the citizenry of Denmark followed through. How can we who are not Muslims register if a registry is imposed? How can those of us who are not Muslims stand with you? How can we best do that? Can we register as Muslims? Give us some advice.
Thank you so much for that question. And even asking that question, I think, is a very big step in the right direction, because it shows intention. And I think anytime you stand in solidarity with any community, it begins with that intention. We've actually been inundated by requests from Americans who want to find out how they can stand in solidarity with the American Muslim community. And that has been probably like the silver lining that really helps get many of us through the day, every single day, when we hear, incidents where Muslims are being attacked or discriminated against. How many of you know of George Takei? I want to see every hand in the room. George Takei, he's a Japanese-American actor. Well, he started Star Trek. You probably know from Star Trek. So he, after the election, he started a petition to collect signatures from individuals who would be willing to register if there was ever, in fact, a Muslim registry that was implemented. Now, one thing I want to point out is that Muslim registries are not new to America. We know under the Bush administration, after 9/11, the NSEERS system was implemented that discriminated against individuals who came from specifically predominantly Muslim countries across the world. So it's not really something that's new to America, but the idea that there would be individuals who would step up and who would voluntarily register to make these kind of efforts ineffective is something that I think really has struck at the core of the American Muslim community. I think many of us sincerely appreciate the effort from folks who want to stand in solidarity, and that is definitely something that we're not necessarily asking people to do, but people who are willing to do that, I think that's something that really sends a strong message to the Muslim community, that you're willing to stand in solidarity with us. Another thing that I would say is that when you see acts of intolerance, acts of discrimination, acts of profiling, acts of injustice, to not stay silent. I can't tell you the number of instances that are reported to our organization and to other organizations where these incidents happen in public and there are bystanders, but the bystanders either ignore the incident or they don't know what to do, so they don't speak up. Don't stay silent. We would never ask anybody to compromise their own safety, because your safety comes first. But if there's any way that you can intervene and help people who are being impacted, especially people whose physical safety is being compromised, to not stay silent. And I would urge that not just for the Muslim community, but also for any vulnerable community that is, who's finding ourselves in the spotlight and who's fearing for our safety in this new political climate. There's a lot of organizations, not just CARE, but a lot of other organizations who are doing wonderful work to support people who are impacted by injustice. So I would recommend supporting those organizations. Whether if you can't afford to financially support them, then volunteer or help promote campaigns and projects that they've launched to raise awareness about different issues that are going on. I hope that's helpful.
Hi, my name is Chaudry. I'm with the National Conference of Black Lawyers. I think that many of us have been Our gray hair shows it. Many of us have been in the movement for a long time. The issue, though, it seems to me, is we can come here regularly and talk about resistance, but each of the panelists at some point talked about a vision. And I think that it's time, and we've done it before, so I don't want to act like things haven't been done before. But in addition to talking about resisting, we need to put together a plan and a vision of what we want. Because that will guide us not only through the 4 years of Trump, but into what I think I was listening to Reverend Hagler was talking about, is to stay with the issue so we don't buy something we don't want, just because it has a D as opposed to an R. I think we need to come out and use this time wisely to stand shoulder to shoulder to build a vision that we're willing to stand up for and fight for. Thank you.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for that. The National Organization for Women, our purpose, which we recently updated, is to take action through intersectional grassroots organizing. So the vision that we articulate, I hope, will be intersectional. All that means is looking to the margins and putting marginalized people at the center of our concern. So if we're going to talk about universal health care, don't talk to me about health care for everyone unless you are going to make it a central concern to eliminate maternal mortality amongst women of color. That is where we have to focus our concerns. If you're going to talk about kids being able to get through college without overwhelming debt, don't talk to me about that unless you're willing to talk about the child care that prevents so many students of color from graduating from college. Put that at the center of your analysis. Don't just say free college. Put the people at the center that are the most marginalized. And quite frankly, most of the time, it's going to be the women in any community that has been marginalized. That's got to be the center of our attention. The original sin of our country was absolutely racism, but it was patriarchal racism. It was racism and sexism combined that was the original sin of our country. When we changed the Constitution and finally pass an Equal Rights Amendment, it needs to be an Equal Rights Amendment that addresses race and gender together. And that is something that we're going to be fighting for too.
Just real quick on your I agree with you on that. We need to find a vision. I would say this though. I would say that one of the things that's very important is that as we're fighting the vision, we need to also include folks who are outside of the academy. I think that one thing for the movement, we need to have more Fannie Lou Hamers of the 21st century who can be a part of the creation of that vision. Now, as you know, I'm with the Hip Hop Caucus, and we had a Respect My Vote campaign. And the one thing that struck me when we were out there amongst the communities was that clearly, along with vision, there has to also be education. I was struck by how the civics and the understanding of civics was in a lot of cases unknown. And so we're going to have to almost go back to communities and work with them, not only creating the vision of what they see for themselves of being empowered about injustice, but also there's some mindset that when we talk about certain things, that also equates for certain communities as money. That equates as an expense. So they see vision differently. Now, the one thing that I would say for us moving forward in regards to vision is that we need to then build our institutions, meaning like historical black colleges and our high schools and our junior high schools, and begin to go there and to discuss the vision within the K-12 ranks, so that what we did see with young people, when we saw in the Hip Hop Caucus, when after the election, young people were leaving their high schools all across this country, furious because they couldn't vote, but they were literally coming together, and I've seen some of the plans from young people, 15, 16, 18. They have a vision for a world that is amazing, and I think we need to also gather our young people, trust them, and hear their vision for a new world as well.
And I just wanted to add one brief point too, and we're talking about putting marginalized communities at the center of our vision. And one thing I think we all have to be careful about, and we all have to be mindful about, is putting those marginalized communities at the forefront, empowering them and giving them the tools to advocate for themselves. It doesn't matter if it's an undocumented immigrant, it doesn't matter if it's a day laborer, it doesn't matter if it's a Muslim. I mean, we are talking about human beings that have the power to advocate for themselves. Too often, we've seen in the past in our progressive causes, sometimes we get too caught up in putting together the stats and putting together nice fluid packages to show the policymakers, and we forget the actual people that we're advocating on behalf of. So let's remember to organize those communities, stand in solidarity with them, but always put them at the front, because their voice is the most powerful tool that we have at our disposal.
And I would add to that only that as we look at this question of building really broad visions of what our world, when we say another world is possible, it means the whole world. So when we talk about those communities being in the front lines, it's front lines all over the world, whether it's Iraqis or Syrians, Palestinians or Venezuelans, whoever it may be, and it can be all of the above, they are at the center of what we do as well.
Yeah. Beautiful. And one of the things I want to also just remind us of is that we get caught up very often in the subterfuge. And what I mean by that is that when we look at the movements as they developed, there was a commonality of thought that existed. There was, even in the black struggle, there was a northern perspective and there was a southern perspective. Right? The northern perspective was represented by W.E.B. Du Bois, and the southern perspective was represented by Booker T. Washington. In the 60s, there was a northern perspective and there was a southern perspective. The northern perspective was represented by Malcolm X, and the southern perspective was represented by Martin King. And people aligned themselves, but there were two perspectives. And then somewhere along the line, people came along and started arguing, oh, the black community is not a monolithic community. In other words, to move people into a kind of bourgeois ideology where you can, in a sense, go with those forces that mean you no good and somehow justify that as some type of philosophical exercise. And that's where we've been caught up right now, today, is that when we look around at the so-called progressive movement, we're here, we're there, we've rationalized a whole lot of things because we don't have a common vision of what the issues look like, what they should feel like, and who they should talk to. And we got to begin to restructure our perspective in order to begin to deal with liberation. Because one of the things that we learned from this last thing that we were engaged in, and I've been preaching very often that we learned some things theologically, and we learned some things politically, right? Theologically, we learned that the so-called safeguarders of morality know nothing about morality, nor care about morality. They're engaged in political expediency. And that's what they were doing. They were saying, oh, well, that doesn't fit, but we got a tactic here that we got to exercise and do with. And the fact is the right wing basically exercised a perspective in almost a calculated, monolithic point of view, and they won it. And we got to get as sharp and as tactical and as pragmatic in terms of what we do if we want to make some progress.
We just got to have a woman who came here to drop off something. I wanted to let her introduce herself and say what she's doing.
Hi everyone, my name is Kristin Sui. I'm co-founder of the Pussycat Project. Some of you know about us. I flew on a red eye today, so I'm a little bit like, oh my god, I'm here. So they don't know what it is. Yes. Okay, so the Pussycat Project is something my co-founder Gina Wyman and I. Oh, someone's knitting one right now. Yes. Pardon? Thank you. Oh, my co-founder made mine. Yeah. And so it's just such an act of love in these difficult times.
What is it?
All right, so Pussycat Project, we are making these cat ear, pussycat, hats, and all these hats here are made by women across the country, across the world. Oh, hello. So all these hats are handmade by women across the country and across the world for marchers of the Women's March. And They want to support us as we march on Washington, and they wish they could be there themselves, but some of them can't due to physical reasons, financial reasons, and so they are giving you a hat to keep you warm on that day.
What does it signify?
Well, you might have guessed it kind of refers to certain comments made by the president-elect, his Access Hollywood video, so there's that. But it's about so much more than that. It's about reclaiming that word pussy for ourselves and wearing these with pride. So anyway, I hope these are for you guys because I figure everyone here is a supporter of women's rights.
Yeah!
And, yeah!
So the hats are free. You can come and get one afterwards. Thank you so much.
A lot of them have notes with the hats where the person who made the hat has written you a note, so please read it. Some of them have contact info. You can reach back and make that connection, and it's just a really beautiful thing. So thank you for being here.
That's beautiful. I just want to segue also from the beautiful woman in the back who brought up vision and story. Edward Snowden was asked, should we be frightened? And he said, no, we shouldn't be frightened. We should be ready. And all the beautiful medicines that people are bringing here, and the concept also of storycraft, that it's time for sane reverence to assume cultural narrative lead. And there's this huge opportunity as the razzmatazz swindle becomes evident, because we're rocking and rolling, there'll be a whole lot of liberated, betrayed energy to be invited to a story. Come on over here. So it's part of all of us, as storycraft, we have a magic mirror, which is secular critic part of all of us holds up the mirror appropriately. It goes, look, it sucks in detail. Trickster within us all, with the way the hand turns the mirror into a window, but look how brilliant and beautiful it could be. And then with another wave of the hand turns it into a door, let's go. So the invitational capacity is available right now, and again, the opportunity for all of us to critique and then vision bless. Woof.
Thank you. So we have two more comments. I know we got a lot of people waiting here, but this woman, and then we're going to let the panelists, close up and have time for networking here.
All right. Good evening. Okay, thanks. Thank you, CodePink. Thank you to all the panelists. You guys are amazing in all the work that you're doing. I just have one point and then one question. The point was in regards to the original sin. I think the original sin of America was against the Native Americans and the genocide that took place there. My question is in regards to the media. The media does a great job in spewing the hatred, the divisiveness, dividing our country. And so in a lot of our work, we're doing coalition building and we're coming together and doing a lot of work, but I don't see a lot of coalitions being built around the media and having a strategy to address the media. Whenever I hear things on the media, I call in, but one person is not going to have an impact. So I would like to see some work being done around addressing the damage that the media is having and doing to our country.
And I think along those lines, a great comment, and I think along those lines we need to build up those people in the media that are actually doing that work. So for example, Mark Thompson, who is on Sirius XM Progressive, is doing amazing work. There's a We Act Radio, which is very progressive and does something. They're local to DC. Their studio is in I think Anacostia. So there are some outlets that have that, and we should be building those up. WBAI in New York City, WCFW here in Washington DC. There are aspects, and one of the things we need to do is make clear that we will not support those media outlets like ABC, CBS, NBC, and CNN that did nothing but misinform Americans before the vote in November. And so we turn our backs on them and promote the media that works for us.
I think that's an excellent question. It's actually something that's very relevant, particularly to Muslims, because we've seen Islamophobia be perpetuated through media, through biased media. And I think that point of elevating voices that are in the media already, but that provide a more balanced narrative is so critical. People like Van Jones, people who really help to change, what some of the stereotypes are about specific groups of people who are especially vulnerable or especially marginalized. In terms of building coalitions, I think that that's something that definitely we could stand to use more of a something that we could build on more. Even with CARE, like oftentimes we'll have people flag, different articles or different media reports to our attention and say, this is something that so-and-so said at such and such a time, and so we can follow up. But if the more people that hold, news channels accountable or news anchors accountable, the more likely they'll be to be careful not to make sure that they're perpetuating those kind of stereotypes. So whether it's through a Twitter hashtag campaign, or whether it's through social media, whether it's through making phone calls to, the managing editors or the studios that are, perpetuating these false media narratives, I think it's so important to, get the word out and build coalitions who are going to help push back against that biased narrative.
So if we could, I know we're distracted by these hats, so if we could be quiet here, you can get a hat after as you leave, there's plenty of them. We're going to take one more comment and...
One more question.
So let's take these two questions and then we're going to wrap up. But please be respectful to our speakers by being quiet. Thank you.
Well, I feel a bit intimidated, but I'll try to make quick. I appreciate the intersectionality and the dealing with marginality, but what's coming up is going to marginalize white people, middle-class people as well, and that is the technological revolution. And we should be directing our vision, I feel, towards how we're going to reorganize the economy and society to deal with all the people who are going to be displaced by the AI and the technological revolution. I just would like to expand our vision about what we're going to be dealing with and talking about.
Awesome.
Anybody want to respond to that?
Absolutely, I think you're right. It turns out when you put the most marginalized people at the center of your analysis, the policies that you come up with actually are good for all of us. And they turn out not to be trickle-down policies or trickle-out policies. They really tend to be policies that are good for everyone. So, for example, health care for all, including all women, and it will actually lift all of us up. I could go on longer, but I don't think we have time.
I just want to say, I do think, and if I heard your question correctly, there will be a whole segment of our population who will lose their current employment due to technology. Is that specifically around what you're? Part of it. Okay. That's correct, and I think that's why the fight for 15 and other fights in regards to remaining and enforcing and strengthening unions will be so important, because you're right, technology and the fact of outsourcing jobs, but even though that's a tough thing with Phyllis.
We have to educate for leisure.
You have to, and I think all those things are important, but I would say this though, as far as a movement is concerned, I do think that as a movement, we have to become more savvy using our technology. I'm not sure that we're using that up to the level that we need to be using that. And I think post-marches are wonderful because they are places where people can come and gather and we can find strength from one another. I'm not alone in this fight. But I do think that where we are seeing is that a lot of racists are able to hide behind their Twitter and their Facebook, and they're using that as a mechanism, and through other Breitbart and other media sources, they're using technology to raise a race war and a sexist war against us. And so I think that we need to also figure out how we can uptick our level of technology to combat that as well.
So last comment or question.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think we got to get out of the mindset or the framework of protest as usual. We got 4 days. Everybody has to throw in. We have got to stop this fascist regime before it gets into power. And if people don't know what to do, come talk to me, I will put you to work. But the second thing, for those who mention fascism, right, it is the elimination of all democratic rights. I mean, Joey Johnson just went up there, right, burnt the American flag. Trump is saying he should be stripped of his citizenship, sent to Guantanamo Bay, you know, taken to jail, punished. I'm curious, there's a gap there then, because if we need resistance with fascism, you know, a month from now, we could be in a hiding place having this meeting,
So let's take that comment and do a last round, and let's start with you, Reverend Hagler.
Yeah, I just want to, in reference to that, I want to say that you're not going to stop this administration from assuming office. It's not going to happen. But what I remind folks is, because somebody pushed back today at me and said, well, if you put 50,000 people out there, they're going to go to office. I said, yeah, but George Wallace was in office, and that's why we had to be in the streets. I mean, it's not about stopping, it's about building a type of movement that continues to challenge day after day after day after day. Because one thing that we forget very often is that this game right now is their game. The Electoral College was white supremacist plantation owners' game, right? And so let's be clear about that. That's their rules. That's their stuff. Our stuff is to build a movement that continues to challenge not only on Friday, but Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, to continue on, because that's where I come out of. I come out of being able to have to stand and build movement and continue to build movement and to see victory after victory. Because I must say, I've seen victory after victory in my life, but only when people are disciplined enough and can join in solidarity enough and stand with each other that we build the kind of pressure and the kind of movement that actually changes things.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add a final perspective from the Indivisible guide, that one of the ways for the next 2 years, as this administration takes office, and we do not, at least at a federal policy level, get to set the agenda, that it is easy to stand together in opposition. That's what the Tea Party did so effectively. They just said no. They didn't take time to decide within Tea Party folks what their progressive vision was. So even as we develop the next chapter of something that looks a lot different than what we're looking at now, it's very simple to stand together if we just get together and say to our elected representatives, whether the Democrat or Republican, that cutting deals with a xenophobe, racist, who has authoritarian tendencies is not bipartisanship. It's unacceptable, and we can do it. Thanks.
Yeah!
I think the key word for us is movement building. Maybe that's 2 words, but that's what we need to be talking about. And I think one of the ways that we've been talking about it all night, and we'll continue to talk about it, is this question of breaking out of silos and making links, so that when we talk about sanctuary cities or sanctuary campuses or sanctuary businesses or sanctuary churches or mosques or whatever it is, we also talk about refugees in there. And when we talk about protecting refugees and welcoming refugees, we also talk about ending the wars that create refugees. And when we talk about wars, we're talking about military wars, and we're talking about climate wars, because all of them create refugees. And those refugees are predominantly women and children, because they are the most vulnerable. And overwhelmingly, the communities that are forced to become refugees are communities of color who are most often indigenous people in their own lands. So we are bringing together, or we have the potential to bring together, all of these movements in every campaign that we raise. It's not the easiest thing to do, but it's not really the hardest either, because we've already been doing the work that shows the analysis, that shows the connections. Now we just have to go out there and do it.
Yeah!
And just echoing that point, I think First of all, I mean, of course we're all scared and pissed off today because we know 1 week from now we're going to be living in a new reality. But what most scares me is what happens on February 20th, on March 20th, April 20th, May 20th. Are we still going to be equally as pissed off, or are we going to withdraw, be complacent, because we're not going to be deported because we're U.S. citizens? We're not Muslims, so we don't have to worry about what's going to happen to Muslims. Maybe it's just a peppering of things here and there. I think that is going to be the true challenge that we have. And we can all make a difference at all levels. I think this is when we have to act locally. I know the eyes are always focused on this orange-headed monster. But the thing of it is, this whole situation is the Republicans' wet dream come true. Let's be honest. He is somebody that they will manipulate, and they will do their best to implement the agenda that they've been waiting 8 years to do. And how do they do it? Through victories at the state legislatures, through victories with their local representatives. They slowly but surely developed the power they have today. We lost a lot of seats all over the state. Why? Because we became complacent because we had Barack Obama as our president. We thought, he's a community organizer. He's multi-ethnic. It's going to be wonderful. Racism is over. Well, we got way too complacent. So, silver linings to the situation is that we can get organized. We can make a difference at all levels. We have to flip state legislatures. We have to flip city councils. We have to flip our local representatives at all levels. Because to implement the worst parts of his agenda, he's going to need a lot of resources. And those resources are going to come from state, local, municipal resources. These things are not going to happen in a faraway land. They're going to happen in our communities. So we have the power to engage our own local legislators and make sure that they do not cooperate, that they resist, that they do not use local resources and your tax dollars to implement their Nazi agenda. So just keep that in mind at all times, that we can resist at all levels. And the resistance starts in this corner right here, in the street corner where you're living on. You don't have to change the presidency to make change locally.
Yay!
I want to echo everything that was said before me, and I want to reiterate the fact that to be unafraid, to be unapologetic in who you are, and to not allow anybody else to allow us to be afraid of demanding the justice that we know each and every one of us deserves. There's a lot of anxiety and there's a lot of fear, but this is an opportunity for us to channel that negative energy into a positive direction and use constructive momentum to be able to build and to be able to expand on efforts that are already underway, and make sure that we're doing everything we can in our personal capacity to push back against the rising intolerance and the rising hatred, because we know it's going to get worse. We're seeing the headlines right now, and we have a premonition of what's to come, but we know that what this, the next administration was capable of doing with the kind of cabinet members or the cabinet nominees who are being appointed or who are under, are going to be appointed soon. So just stay woke, like my friend says, to stay woke and keep an eye out. We can't afford to be ignorant. We can't afford to be negligent. We can't afford to close our eyes and shut our eyes and turn a blind eye to what's going on around us, no matter how difficult reality might be. And to keep on building coalitions, because that's what's really going to help us get through this in the end of the day. Building coalitions and surrounding ourselves with people who are going to help us keep on pushing back against the growing intolerance and the bigotry.
Thank you for the hat. Appreciate that. I saw Medea in North Dakota, and she was just there. I know a number of folks from CodePink. They were there, and I watched them because I've been in Standing Rock a number of times, and I wanted to watch them not only because she's my friend and CodePink is an ally, but I wanted to see what they were doing. It was clear they were there. To your question about Trump, the reason, well, I won't say the reason because I don't know all the reasons. I'll just say, if we don't engage in love, people know that. People know if you love them or don't love them. And I think too many people when I see our movement, and they don't feel the love that they need to feel back from us. And I think that as we as a movement move forward, we have to really make sure that we're showing the love to those who are in Iraq, in Syria, in Palestine, in the Congo, those who are in Honduras, those who are in Mexico, those who are all over this world. We have to show love and solidarity. Our movement wants to talk and give talking points and say how much we know and explain that we understand the issues and who's being oppressed and who's being depressed and who's facing racism or sexism. When the most important thing that we can do to fight for humanity is love. This is not about Republican or Democrat, it's about humanity. And once we put humanity forward over our organizations, over our backgrounds, and we show other humans that we love them and that we're with them, and that when their child is hungry, we feel that. And when their mother is hurting because she lost her job, we understand that. And when their brother or sister goes to jail, we understand what they're going through. So we begin to attack the things that attack them. So criminal justice, we attack that. The fossil fuel industry, we attack that. Militarism, we attack the things that are hurting the people because we love the people. If we don't have love, the people know it. They smell it on us. They see it on us. They see they were only here for whatever reason, but it's not about them. If there's ever a time when we have to be the movement of love, overwhelming love, it is now. Love so powerful that it will even make the Trumps and the Tillersons, as crazy as that may be, they will feel our love. They may not never be with us, but our love will affect the masses. But we have to be a movement of love, or we will be a people and a movement that will be defeated.
And you know, it has, I am still not out of the stages of grief knowing that we are not going to stop this man from becoming President of the United States. But I highly recommend a book by Hannah Arendt. It's called The Origins of Totalitarianism, right? There were liberals and progressives in Germany who were appalled and horrified when Adolf Hitler came to power in Germany. They were not able to stop him from taking power, but they did build a resistance. And the existence of the resistance mattered. And to show up for one another with pussy power right here on the stage. Yeah. It's beautiful. I think that how we win is by speaking out. How we win is not by stopping this man from becoming president, but by protesting, by resisting, by blocking, by engaging with one another and showing up for one another.
Trump just averted war with Russia. He wants to have peace with Russia. We're hearing all this hate. What's that? Peace for love with Russia.
Okay. And so how we win is
Who are you?
Can we finish up here?
We gotta wrap it up.
Yes, sorry. So I really think we win even if we don't achieve a short-term objective. We still win by fighting even when we go down swinging.
Yeah. So let's give a big hand to our panel here. Thank you all, amazing people. Let's give a hand to our wait staff and generous tips to them. And anybody who wants to give a suggestion of what our next month Trump Exposed should be, come talk to me. We also have CodePink paraphernalia and my latest book on Saudi Arabia there if you want. And if anybody wants to get a picture up here, a group picture in your pussy hat, please come up to the front. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Andy and Marjan. Good night.
So you've been listening to a panel of experts and activists speaking about immigration, race, environment, and economic policy, Islamophobia, and foreign policy in the age of Trump. Speakers included Terry O'Neill, president of NOW, Phyllis Bennis of the Institute for Policy Studies, Reverend Yearwood Hagler, Reverend Lennox Yearwood with the Hip-Hop Caucus, Zainab Chaudry with the Council of American Islamic Relations, and George Escobar with the Casa de Maryland, narrated by Medea Benjamin. Thank you for joining us.
I was going to say something
We're left on good terms, and I got an autographed copy of Medea's book.